Hey there, good evening. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. It is BronxNet's program where we find all kinds of interesting things in the Bronx. And we've got two really fascinating segments. And the first one, we're going to get started right away with students from my alma mater. My alma mater is Lehman College. So it is journalism students. It is Kiwana Grant Floyd. We call her Kiki. Nice to see you, Kiwana, or Kiki. Thanks for
Nice
joining
to
us.
see you.
Good. And Victoria Moran Garcia. Victoria, nice to have you with us.
Hi, thank you for having us.
These are two journalism students, and they work on their paper, which is the Bronx Journal. Kiki, just a little bit about you. Why did you take journalism at Lehman College? What do you have inside you that made you want to do that?
So, when I graduated from high school in 2020,
Where'd you go to
I've
high
always
school?
been interested. Oh, I went to high school at Bronx Center for Science and Mathematics, so
Okay,
it's
just want to
pretty
clear it
far
up.
from Lehman. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, all in the Bronx, based in the Bronx. So I always had an interest in writing and current events, and then I thought, okay, I don't want to do like when I think of English, I don't think I think of like becoming a teacher, and I was like, journalism at least allows me to have an impact on current events in the real world. So I thought, why not writing current events journalism? So that's why I decided to
There you go.
enroll in the journalism program.
Well, I can only tell you that I was an English major at Lehman College, and somehow I found my way into a different field that wasn't teaching. And what do you like about it? What inspires you about? I mean, you've suggested it in what you said, but what does inspire you about um, doing journalism?
Honestly, I really just like I'm a reserved person, so it's nice to be able to have an excuse to go out into the community and actually talk to people about things that, that issues that are important to them. That's really why I like journalism because it brings me out of my shell and it allows me to connect with people in a way that I probably normally wouldn't if I didn't have the excuse of just getting to
There
learn
to
what's
be a
important to
journalist, yeah.
people.
You know what I really like about and what you've suggested here is you have a passion about telling a story about something that means something, and we're going to address that in a moment. Victoria, same questions for you. Tell me a little bit about why you got into journalism at Lehman College.
Yeah, I always like talking to people, and writing and taking pictures, and so it seemed like a natural thing to do. And since then, I've really gotten into audio production, which hence the podcast. So, yeah, I really enjoyed doing this major and being able to learn more about New York City and specifically the Bronx, since I'm from East Harlem, so I didn't really have much context. Yeah, I've really enjoyed
And
it so
and you
far, though.
and you're learning how amazing we are over here in the BX. I always tell people
Yeah.
that it's like undiscovered territory because nobody knows who we really are. We just, and Victoria, you've suggested the podcast. Talk to me about fighting forward the Bronx environmental justice story. How did that begin? And what made the both of you get involved in this podcast about the environment in the Bronx?
Yeah, so in we've learned a lot about in classes campaigns about the Bronx and how having to do with housing and just anything that affects people in the Bronx. And one of the major things that kept coming up was pollution and housing. And so through this podcast, you were able to talk to people who actually did something about what was affecting their community. So the podcast, we interviewed a bunch of activists from the Bronx to learn about what was affecting them and how they stood up to it, whether it be the air quality, the housing during the Bronx fires, how they were able to rebuild, and then community gardens, how they are continuing to try to become independent.
And so it seems clear to me. This seems like a somewhat perfect educational experience because clearly you're doing something that you're putting it out and you're letting people see what it is, but you're both learning something along the way. Kiki, we're about to play a piece of this podcast that is available in the Bronx Journal. Um, is there some kind of introduction you want to give to what we're about to hear?
Yes. So this episode was mainly about only really about the Fresh Direct fight that happened about a little over a decade ago. And we interviewed this lifelong Bronx Puerto Rican activist, and he was talking about just how this group called South Bronx Unite was birthed out of this fight. So that's really what the context behind this
There
book
you
is.
go. Okay, so here we go. This is Fighting Forward, the Bronx Environmental Justice Story, and it is a podcast, and Victoria and Kiwana have done it. Let's take a look and a listen.
Fresh Direct is an online grocery company that sells and delivers food using diesel-powered trucks. EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, has outlined the many drawbacks to using diesel engines, including the harmful impacts on human health and the environment. Exposure to diesel exhaust leads to asthma and other respiratory illnesses. The exhaust creates ground-level ozone and acid rain. These effects are especially detrimental in a neighborhood filled with people who do not have access to quality health care and cannot miss days of school or work to make emergency room visits. So in response to the blatant disregard of the community and their needs, South Bronx Unite sued everyone.
The fight started in early 2012. We sued them. We sued Fresh Direct. We sued the Borough of the Bronx. We sued the city.
Unfortunately, they lost.
And we lost those cases in part because the justice system here works with judges that are appointed by their political appointees, and so they're beholden to political elected officials.
Although they lost that part of the fight, South Bronx Unite made a mark on Fresh Direct's image.
At some point, so the executive director, the president of Fresh Direct, the CEO at that time, Jason Ackerman, he was the executive director back then, but we created so much trouble that looking for new investment for Fresh Direct became a problem, and eventually the board of directors of Fresh Direct fired him.
This created the foundation and tone of South Bronx Unite. If there is a threat to the neighborhood, they won't lie.
All right, there you go. You get a sense of what you guys do. Victoria, let's just start with you. You've suggested already some of the things you've learned using that. By the way, who was that? I was listening because I know so many of them. I didn't recognize the voice.
That was Moncho Lopez from South Bronx Unite.
I know him very well. I didn't know him well enough to recognize his voice. But what did you learn from that experience? I mean, here was a case, the community was not for it. I mean, I recall that dialogue. I mean, I've been here for a number of years. But what did you learn ultimately about that?
I feel like I was just like introduced to a whole new world. I have a lot of family in the South Bronx, and I always knew that like there was water surrounding us, but I had never really gone to it. And so this was kind of an explanation and like a deeper understanding of how like the community just did not have access to it, and there were people trying to do something about it. It really just felt like an introduction to a whole new world, and like being able to go out there into Mount Haven and see like all the factories and stuff. It was really eye-opening and understanding like, oh, that's why it's kind of difficult to breathe here.
Well, that's the beginnings of it. I mean, it's very complicated. The peaker plants over there in that same part of the Bronx. Kiki, same question for you. What is it that this whole experience? Now, we played 2.5 minutes of a 4-part podcast, so there's a lot in there. But Kiki, what did you take away from the experience and also what you heard?
Well, I'm a Bronx native, so I felt like I didn't really know a lot about the environmental, work that was being done for the past, almost 40 years. And I thought that this was a great opportunity for me to go out to different parts of the Bronx to learn about what people were doing, even if it's like very close to me, because I'm not too far from Mott Haven, which was where the Fresh Direct fight was taking place. So I got to learn a lot about, what like just how small the city is and how like a lot of the campaigns people know each other, and it was nice to get to understand just that things aren't just like there's a reason why things are the way they are.
That's right.
It was nice to be able to understand that.
What I can give you 2 things about what you said. Number one, one of the things about the people in the Bronx, and this is a matter of historical record, we've had to bond together to figure out how to deal with many of the things that are being put upon us. I mean, we could talk about the burning of the Bronx, that's been well documented, and all those kinds of things. But when you have an issue like this, where the community says this isn't really the best thing that we want, and even, and here's the second part of what I wanted to say, even though there was a lot of protests, and ultimately the Fresh Direct does have a very active a plant over there in that part of the Bronx. They earned many concessions, and they forced Fresh Direct to do things like electric vehicles. There's been some question about how successful that's been, but they forced them to do it. Plus, Fresh Direct did a lot in the community to say, listen, we know you don't, they didn't say this, but we know you don't really, really like what we did, but they host things, they make donations and all that. And I'm not saying that's a one-for-one trade-off, but it is a concession that was won. Uh, Kiki, let's just ask you, what's next? What are you guys working on next? Do you have something in your mind that you're saying we're going to focus on next? Like, you did this, what's next? Or you're going to do more of the same story?
Well, for me personally, I am a graduating senior,
Oh,
as well as Victoria is. I don't know exactly what I want to do after this, like what project
okay.
I'm focused on right now, but I am interning at Fairness and Accuracy and Reporting, FAIR. And I think I just want to stick with journalism and just media because I really think there's some like there's just I really have an interest there, a passion there. I don't know what type of journalism I want to do, but I know that it has to do really with environment. So far, how like probably housing and environment. I really enjoy writing stories about that, and
There
that's
you go.
been my main focus.
We
So
we need young journalists who really care about our borough. I mean, there's no question about it. Victoria, so you're graduating also. I didn't realize that. And what do you think about what you want to do next, or we're going to find out, or where are we at?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still so much more to dig into this. We didn't even get to include everyone that we interviewed over the summer. So hopefully I'll be able to write more on that and use some of those interviews and shed light on that more. But further than that, I don't know. I really like writing about the Bronx and about New York City, and there's just so much to write about.
And in the BX, it's endless. Listen, thanks, guys. We really, really appreciate what you have done. And we know that we're going to be very interested in what you will be doing as time goes on. You know who we are at BronxNet, and we'd love to have you. Maybe you could do some work over here. That would be fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us on the Bronx Buzz.
Thank you so much.
thank you for having us.
Okie dokie, folks. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, there is a beautiful mural created at one of the local hospitals. Don't go away.